Freaks, it's JJ. I'm back. Sorry about ghosting on you guys for so long. But I'm back and I'm doing the video that you guys most wanted to hear, I think. So this is my theory video for No World for Tomorrow. Coheed and Cambria. The full title is Good Apollo and Burning Star 4, Volume 2, No World for Tomorrow, or just No World for Tomorrow for short. So again, there are new comics for this album yet. Claudio and Chandra have not yet written them. And I can understand why, because it's pretty hard to write an ending for this whole universe that you've been working on for years and years. So this album came out in 2007, so it's 2019 now. It's been years. They say they're working on it, so hopefully we will get the official comics here pretty soon. So this is my theory video on how I would end the Amory Wars, and it's really more like fan fiction because I took a lot of liberties with this because there's not really a whole lot, that I could go off of. I'm really only going off of the lyrics and the songs and kind of how they made me think that things would go, as well as, knowledge from all the other comics and the characters and the storyline. So, I'm going to go track by track on this one, just because it's easier to organize when you go track by track. Even though some storyline might not fit the song exactly, it might kind of bleed into the next song or have things to do with other songs, but I'll let you guys figure that out on your own. So, here goes nothing. So track 1, The Reaping. We left off in the last comics, Ambelina has just died in Claudio's arms. Ryder's been killed both in the Amory Wars universe and in the real life. And also, Mayo has killed Inferno, but Inferno at the last minute downloaded his consciousness into Mayo, so Mayo is also Inferno. We'll get into that later. So we pick up again right at the end of the last comics, where Claudio is pretty distraught by Ambelina's death, and Ryder's soul is now trapped in Heaven's Fence universe. So since Ryder was kind of god of Heaven's Fence and the Amory Wars universe, since he was the writer of it, and he went inside and died in there, now his soul is trapped in there. So his soul kind of attaches itself onto Claudio because they're kind of like the same person. Claudio is the mirror image of Ryder, but kind of the opposite. And so Ryder's soul attaches onto Claudio, and his, psychopath mind and twisted soul just attach onto Claudio while he's vulnerable, mourning over Ambelina's death. And Ryder just kind of takes over Claudio. So Claudio's now sees himself as a god, and he decides that he wants to destroy all the worlds and just burn everything to the ground. So he sets off to, first of all, burn Star 4. So that brings us to track 2, No World for Tomorrow. So Claudio begins destroying Star 4. So now that he has Ryder's soul along with his own, he's fully become the Crowing, and his powers are completely unstoppable. He's 100 times stronger than he ever was without Ryder's soul attached to him. And now that he's finally accepted his fate, and he thinks of himself as God, and he's kind of gone all crazy, he just destroys Star 4 and all the prize on it. So now the prize are all dead. The prize cannot come back and save them like they normally do in the comics. So no more prize. So he destroys Star 4 before anyone really realizes what the hell's going on. And so by the time Chase, Inferno/Mayo, and everyone figure out what happened, they're like, well, shit, I guess Claudio's gone dark side. So they decide to make a plan. Chase momentarily stabilizes the Keywork. So after Star 4 burns off, the whole Keywork starts to kind of unravel and start falling apart. So Chase uses her powers to momentarily just hold everything together so everyone doesn't die immediately, but it's not going to last very long. So then Mayo/Inferno, he decides that the best way to try and take Claudio down is to harvest all the souls that Willem Ryan had collected over the years to use for his own powers. Since those souls are really powerful, Inferno/Mayo thinks that it would be best to try and get control of those to use those against Claudio to take him down. And the song is also kind of a call to arms for anyone who's willing to fight, because pretty much everyone's lives depend on it. The whole Heaven's Fence is starting to fall apart. So that brings us to track 3, The Hound of Blood and Rank. So this one is about Inferno/Mayo. So right when Inferno died, he transferred his consciousness into Mayo, Deft and Wolf. So now they're sharing a body now. So in my version, Mayo is still present in his mind as well as Inferno. So he has this inner battle going on. The two opposing characters, which are really very similar, but they're on opposite sides. So they fight with each other on the inside, and then Inferno finally shows Mayo that Ryan has been manipulating him the whole time and just getting what he wants out of him. So then Mayo finally figures out, okay, well, maybe I have been on the wrong side the whole time. So Mayo decides to switch his alliances, but his only condition is that he gets to take his revenge on Ryan in the process. So that brings us to track 4, Feathers. So Chase tries one last-ditch effort to try and get Claudio to come back to himself. So Chase brings Claudio to Nuo's house. She kind of lures him there. So at first it seems like it's going to work. The Claudio side is starting to come back, but then the Ryder side takes over. He sees Nuo, and he pictures her as Erica Court, and then he sees Nuo with her husband, and he thinks that it's Erica cheating on him again, and so he goes crazy, loses control, and ends up killing Nuo and her husband. So track 5, Running Free. So Mayo proves his new loyalty to Inferno by setting up Ryan's downfall. Inferno/Mayo leads the whole rebellion into House Atlantic and tricks Ryan into giving up the password to free all the tortured souls that he's collected over the years. So then Mayo turns on Ryan and lets free all these souls, and all these tormented souls that Ryan's kept over the years start attacking him and slowly torturing him to death. So, the Running Free, You're Going Home lyric part of the song is kind of about the souls returning to the Keywork, returning to where they belong, instead of being tortured for centuries and centuries. While some of them go free and go back to the Keywork, some of them stay and just continue to torture Ryan to death because they hate him that much. So track 6, Mother Superior. Probably one of my favorite tracks on the whole album, just so you know. Here we go inside the Keywork. So Cyrus Amory, getting his name right this time, hopefully, fingers crossed, is still alive inside the Keywork. So this is from the Afterman. If you haven't watched that video, go watch those videos or you're not going to know who I'm talking about. He went back into the Keywork to help Mary cross over into the Paradise part of the afterlife. When it came for his time, after he helped over to the Paradise, he was going to follow her there. But then he got scared at the last minute. He was like, well, there's no one here to help me over into the Paradise. When these souls transfer over into the afterlife, into the mono, they get kind of lost and confused. He's like, what if I get lost and confused and I can't make it over to the Paradise on my own? And so he pauses for a minute, and then while he's thinking about it, he starts helping all these other souls, help get them into the Paradise of the afterlife as well. And so then it just becomes a cycle, and he thinks that these souls need him. If he leaves, then there'll be no one to help guide all these souls into the Paradise of the afterlife. They'll just be stuck in the mono forever. And so that's kind of his excuse for not leaving and following Mary over into the Paradise. In the way he stayed alive for all these years is he's drawing off the power of all these souls. All these entities that he comes in contact with, he touches them and he gets like a shock of power, and that's been keeping him alive for all these years. And it's also become an addiction to him. He can't stop. He likes the feeling of the power he gets every time he touches one of these entities because they're just raw power. And Mother, he started calling Mother Superior because she's kind of been his conscience in all this, and she's been trying to convince him to go follow Mary into death, but he is too afraid and too addicted to what he has now to do it. Okay, that brings us to track 7, Gravemakers and Gunslingers. So, if you remember the Narrows leader from the past comics named Gibney, he's that cowboy hat zombie looking guy, who was killed by Ryder at the end of the comics. Well, we think he was killed by Ryder, but in my version, he's actually survived that, and he still has his personal vendetta against Inferno for leading a poor rebellion and all that stuff. You kind of have to read the comics to get that backstory. Long story short, he hates Inferno. So Gibney decides to bring back Mariah, Inferno's old girlfriend, who was beheaded by Willem Ryan. He decides to bring her back as a Narrow, and so he rebuilds her and reanimates her into Narrow, which is basically a cyborg zombie version of the person. So she's not Mariah at all. She's just this zombie, bloodthirsty zombie type thing. And then Gibney brings all his Narrows army to the rebellion to help fight Claudio and save the worlds. But he doesn't know that Inferno is inside Mayo's body. So then Mayo/Inferno sees Gibney and sees this demented version of the woman he used to love, and he gets thrown into a rage and decides to kill Gibney. They get in a big fight, and obviously Inferno/Mayo wins because he's way stronger. So he kills Gibney. He gets control of the Narrows army to help use it against Claudio. And he also has to kill the version of Mariah because he can't stand to look at her in the way that she is now. Okay, so that brings us to track 8, Justice and Murder. Inferno goes on a suicide mission to try and kill Claudio. He decides that now that he has both him and Mayo as one person, they're stronger now than they were separately. And now that they're on the same page, fighting for the same purpose, he decides that instead of sacrificing his whole entire army of all these people that he's collected in the past few days to try and save the worlds, he decides that maybe just he himself is strong enough to bring down Claudio. You know, why sacrifice an entire army if one guy can do it on his own? But Claudio sees Inferno and pretty much kills him with the flick of his wrist, and has no reaction at all. He doesn't give a fuck. He just kills him. Okay, and now we are at track 9, the incomplete Fall of House Atlantic. So Claudio goes to Apathy Prime, to House Atlantic, and decides that this is going to be his place to destroy Heaven's Fence. It's going to be the center point of his entire murder of the universe, basically. Then we go on to track 10, the incomplete radio bye-bye. So Inferno leaves on his suicide mission to kill Claudio and leaves instructions on the radio, kind of a call to arms for everyone on the planets of the Keywork to help try and stop Claudio. But then he gets murdered by Claudio and everyone hears it on the radio. So everyone's kind of like, oh, this hero, but then they hear him die, so they're kind of discouraged by that. Then Chase uses the last of her powers. Remember, she's just still holding the Keywork together barely, but that power's running out. So she uses the very last amount of her energy to send a message out into the Keywork to anyone who might be listening. She sends a message out into the Keywork to try and ask for help, anyone who can help him, because the Keywork is the only power that can actually save the world now, that Claudio has begun his destruction. That brings us to track 11, Incomplete and Complete. This takes place inside the Keywork. So Cyrus Amory notices that all the souls are kind of acting weird. They're all seem to be getting ready for something. They've stopped fighting each other, and they're kind of banding together to prepare for the end of Heaven's Fence. And then Claudio begins his destruction, and all the planets begin to break apart. He annihilates Apathy Prime and all the surrounding planets. Everything's falling apart. And then that brings us to track 12, Incomplete, The Road and the Damned. So all the rage and power that Claudio used kind of escapes him after he's like set all of the planets into destructive motion. It's kind of a domino effect, you know, once he started. You can't really stop the planets falling apart and crashing into each other and breaking apart. And so after he's spent up all his energy and all his power, he kind of comes back to himself and he realizes what he's done. You know, he's basically killed everyone he ever cared about, and he's destroyed his entire universe. So this song is kind of Claudio lamenting what he's done and just, you know, looking at, just kind of wondering how he got here. And then we go to Cyrus Amory. He hears this Chase calling into the Keywork. And since Cyrus is the only living person in the Keywork, he's the only one who can actually respond cognitively to her instructions. And so he follows Chase's instructions. He organizes all the souls in the Keywork and gives them instructions on how to save some of the worlds that are left. He organizes souls and tells them to all spread out from each other. So they all begin to spread out. They're no longer in close contact with each other. They're not even touching each other. All that blue energy light is starting to fade as they move outwards. So they spread farther and farther out, and their power kind of becomes a little bit weaker and weaker, but it's enough to kind of set things into motion. It creates the gravity between the planets and sets them turning around each other so that they can create their own solar systems, more like how our actual universe kind of works. So some of the planets have made it into like a little solar system. A lot of them are gone. There's probably only like a quarter of them left, maybe. And most of the people are dead. But, I mean, they've saved a semblance of what was left from Heaven's Fence. Brings us to the final track, track 13, Incomplete, On the Brink. So, without contact with the souls to keep him alive, Cyrus dies, finally. And happily, he goes on his journey to go find Mary in the afterlife. Chase dies of exhaustion after transmitting the instructions into the Keywork, and shortly before Apathy Prime explodes and kills everyone on it anyway. So the entire army, everyone who band together against Claudio, is now dead. Pretty much all the characters we ever met are dead. Claudio is dead. He died during the destruction of Apathy Prime shortly after. after the chain reaction of all the planets crashing into each other and exploding and falling off into space, Claudio dies in that destruction as well. So all the characters are dead, everyone we know is dead, and I think that's kind of how we end everything. The track On the Brink has a lot of ups and downs to it, and so what I kind of imagine at the end after everyone dies is like a young version of Claudio closing the book on the Amory Wars, and it's not like an actual book, it's just like a spiral-bound notebook with like, you know, childish writings and drawings, and he closes the book to it as he's in the back seat and gets driven away from Amory Drive, which is the street he grew up on in real life. So that's why he named it the Amory Wars. It's the name of the street he grew up on. So he drives away from Amory Drive, and from the notebook we can kind of hear the characters echo the word hail from inside, you know, just because they're happy that they got to live such an exciting existence, and they're hailing their creator. Anyway, that's my theory video. I know there's some loose ends, things that don't quite exactly match up. Sorry I killed everyone, but I think that's kind of the clean break that we needed for this story in order to like officially move on. Yeah, let me know what you think. If you don't like it, then write your own theory video. If there's any tracks where you're like, oh, I had this one idea of like how I always envisioned it, every time I hear the song, this is what I think of. I mean, I'd be interested to know those. Let me know about them. I just got back last weekend from seeing Coheed for the 5th time at the Exit 111 Festival in here in Tennessee. And it was one of the greatest experiences ever. So my next video, I'm going to tell you a little bit about that concert, which was incredible, along with some Halloween stuff. So if you want to hear about my Coheed experience last weekend, which was incredible, and if you want to hear some Halloween-y type stuff to do with Coheed, then hit subscribe to get notified when I do that video, hopefully before Halloween and before next week. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys.